wondering, have you read the most recent runs of Wonder Woman? I think it's Greg Rucka and Gail Simone. What you thought, and if you guys well, Phil, if you wrote Wonder Woman again, or Mark, if you write Wonder Woman, what would you do differently to bring the character into the 21st century and make her more accessible to the LGBT community, if at all?
Everybody hear that?
That's a nice, simple question.
And go.
I don't think Wonder Woman needs a whole hell of a lot of tinkering. I think all the raw material is there. I just think it's figuring out the alchemy to make it work. Just to touch back on the Maxwell Lord thing, I don't think I would like Wonder Woman if she snaps and acts multiple, but in that moment worked for me in the context of the drama. If she became a killer, I think that would be totally counterintuitive to her, but just to put it on that. I don't think Wonder Woman needs a whole lot of revamping and changing. Like I said, I think everything's there. The pieces are there. It's just a matter of making them, putting them in.
What if you had to come up with something? I mean, I know that in terms of character, and this is usually difficult. I'm a writer. You're a writer. I'm not as righty as you, but it's when you're approaching a character from a writing standpoint, you're coming up with all the things that make it interesting. What above and beyond that can you think of? I'm not wanting to say marketing-wise, but like what can you think of that would be a new take or a new angle or a new thing or a new something that would be kind of a hook or that would draw people in?
Yes, to address the question, and this is a broad. I feel like we're sort of veering way off topic, but the interesting thing about thinking of the Rucker run or the Simone run or my run or George's, any run is they're not written in vacuums. There's all sorts of editorial things that we get to deal with, particularly crossover events, etc. And it's very hard for me to look at those runs and what they accomplish or didn't accomplish without thinking about, oh, well, I know why they did this because they were made to, or this choice was made because they had to service this other story. Keeping in mind that Wonder Woman is generally like sort of ugly stepsister of the DCU, and it's just sort of this thing that they struggle with because she's not a commercial success. And so they're constantly trying to make her one. And again, appealing to people, I don't think she's ever going to appeal to. I don't know about you, but I sort of feel like the characters I like, the characters I like, and the ones I don't, and the ones I don't. And I've read runs where I'm like, oh, that was fabulous, creatively vibrant, you know, sort of beautifully drawn. Do I give a shit about the character, excuse me? No, like it's just not my thing. And the thing is, like, what we're stuck with, I think, in this commercial world is this sense that Wonder Woman has a lot of outside commercial appeal. Like I always like to count the number of like women and girls dressed as Wonder Woman in Halloween parades. People obviously recognize the imagery, they recognize the bracelet thing, etc. So people know about her. But I don't necessarily think she's going, I don't believe that this constant tinkering is going to make her appeal to anyone, or what makes her wonderful isn't going to appeal to anyone over a certain age that it doesn't appeal to already. Like, I don't believe that Wonder Woman is not simply sort of a feminist icon, but a gay icon. And I think, unfortunately, women and gay people, gay men, are a small niche part of this larger community, particularly the way comics are targeted. We're not their audience. Like, as long as we're buying, that's great. But what they're really worried about is this core of people who are just like them. And so I think, like, in terms of tinkering, I don't think I tinker much. I would probably have to. Like, I blew up Paradise Island because I had to, not because I wanted to. You know, but it was. Like Mark, I think it's all there, and I think it's appealing. The problem is it's not going to appeal to the base market.
Do you think it's just a matter of reaching out to the audiences in a different way and broadening the audience, changing the audience, and rather than saying, let's try and get the straight 16-year-old kid who reads X-Men to read Wonder Woman? Do you think instead of doing that, do you think it's more about working hard to get the audience that already appreciates the character?
I think, and I'm sure Phil has an opinion on this too, but I think it's trying to tell the best Wonder Woman story you can and quality work. And that might sound Pollyanna-ish, but if you're doing quality work and it gets a chance to grow, which is the big F in the comic market these days, people will find it. I mean, I had no real interest in Swamp Thing as I was a kid, and then I started picking up the Alan Moore Swamp Things, and that's become one of my favorite things of all time in comics writing. And it was because it was this character I had no real investment in, that I knew, And the quality of the work, the originality and storytelling, I think it's telling good stories. I think it's as simple as that. You start going after the 15-year-old Latino boys who live in this part of town and the 17-year-old white girls from here, you're fractioning it, you're fragmenting it, and you're making it so you kind of kill the general audience.
And if you do want to appeal to a larger audience, it's important to remove the character from all the entanglements that Phil was just talking about. If you wanted to read a good Storm story, does anybody know even where you would start to find a good Storm story?
I do.
Well, very well. But in general, it's one of these things that if I'm trying to say to someone, hey, you might like Storm, or you're wearing a Storm t-shirt, you might like reading this book, I don't know what to recommend to them. If someone is wearing, any female superheroine, and I see them in the real world, and I ask them about that, or I make a comment, 90% of the time, they've never read the comics. And I don't know what it is to offer them, because I can't offer them the latest crossover book, or the one that you have to buy 8 trade paperbacks to try and read one story in which the character appears, 17 pages in. So I think removing those characters and giving them their moments to shine is also very important. And very few female characters get that moment to shine.
Let's go to the next question.
It was interesting that you touched on that you can't really find a specific comic, because most of my exposure to Divas has been through animated series and movies and whatnot, and the Wonder Woman series and the animated adventures of Batman, which have Batgirl, which relates to my question. How do you guys feel about the really fun, campy, like superhero team-ups they have, like Girls' Night Out and whatnot, where Batgirl teams up with Supergirl to take down like Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy? I always thought those were really fun. So what do you guys think of those?
I was disappointed that the meeting in the waiting room wasn't a little more scandalous, but
Read it more interestingly. I was glad, like that one, for instance, the Ladies' Night Out issue being a perfect example. It was a nice story. It would have been exceptional if it had been written by a gay man or a woman. That's the type of thing. I behind the scenes, been trying to get the Sensation Comics relaunch going as an anthology, and I got the Hernandez brothers, Gilbert and Jaime Hernandez from Love and Rockets, to agree to do Wonder Woman with me as part of this launch. Could not get anybody at DC to even express interest, because that was not interesting to them. Having fun, cool Wonder Woman stories by a cool indie artist and by a gay writer was not any, zero interest. The only person interested was Gail Simone.
Well,
she couldn't do it.
I think it comes back to, like Mark was saying, you get people who are talented people to tell good stories, and then the issue with after you've done that is trying to make sure that it gets in front of the people who are going to be voracious for that style or that type of story. And I think it's a combination of marketing outreach, like trying to diversify the audience that's there, as opposed to just kind of a dwindling
I actually think,
fanboy market.
again, divas and whatnot, I think our diva characters, both at Marvel and DC, could breathe and could expand exponentially in popularity. They weren't targeted to the core audience. I actually
They
think
weren't made to appeal to
right.
them
I
as
think
well.
if you could get Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Batgirl, to a lesser extent some of the X-Men women, out, nothing personal, beyond us, and if you could get, I think they would appeal immensely to non-fans, particularly gay people and women, young girls.
Next question.
Well, I just thought, because you asked for sort of audience perspective, I thought I'd inject some L into the GL team. And I think it's something that, well, from my perspective, like, I certainly want to fuck Wonder Woman, but I think there's often an assumption that lesbians or women are going to come into the comics from female characters, and we're often, we're used to coming into text through the male characters. Often the female characters are so constrained by being heterosexual, by having very constrained, conventional female roles. I don't want to go there because that's not me. I'm Batman. So that's where I come into the text. I'm Batman, and I'm getting off with Robin. And I think a lot of queer people are coming into the text through different ways, and so I think, you know, when you're having those discussions about it, and, you know, it's the whole mask thing as well, plus the nibbles on the bat suit, but it's, you know, it's a different way that we come into the text, and I think straight women to some extent do as well, but I think for a lot of queer people, you know, that's we coming through the male characters. So
that's also not unusual just with female characters generally. Statistically, at a very young age, boys stop reading any sort of story with a lead female character. Young women, I think it's almost at 7, will read books about boys and girls, partly for the reasons you've described, partly because of the way female characters are written, but it's also there's all sorts of interesting studies about how early the gender divide comes in and how boys are trained at a really young age not to invest in female leads, but girls will go back and forth. They have a much easier time doing that.
That's why Disney, as a matter of fact, after Princess and the Frog underperformed,
right.
They got a Rapunzel movie coming out. It's not called Rapunzel, it's called Tangle, because they don't think the parents think their sons to see a movie called Rapunzel.
She snapped someone's neck.
I would like to see a more butch superhero female.
Yes. One more question.
Oh, sorry. Before
No pressure.
No pressure. Make it really, really good.
If before I can go with my question, I can tease the name of a couple of good storm stories out of Bill.
All my favorite song stuff is ultimately from the 80s, but that development stuff, if you get like, what is it, I forget the black and white trades, it's like Essential X-Men, like, I think it's 4 and 5 or 5 and 6, like Storm's amazing and that stuff, but you can see the potential in that character.
Okay. So I'm here to round out the LGBT abbreviation with the B and the T. And I'm going to ask, well, are we going to see a cascade of sexual minority characters kind of going from camp gay to drag queen and beyond? I've yet to see a character that cross-dresses that doesn't do it with a villainous purpose or
The Invisibles.
smirky.
Lord, yeah. Seriously, I drew this drag queen about 10 years ago. It was one of the best characters I've ever drawn.
And Michael says that.
Yeah. And actually, in the indie books, there's a really wide variety of.
We're getting yanked.
So I'll segue into come down to the Prism Comics booth, shop there if you want a great selection.
Wonder Woman